Come on by and have a bite at the Crossroad Diner, a place where your spirit goes when it might just be time to change direction. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Crossroad Diner. I'm Steve McCurdy, your host. I've often said that everybody's got a story and everybody is sort of in charge of their story, but it takes a while sometimes for you to discover that you need to do something about that. That's when you end up in the diner changing directions. Sometimes that's to pursue a goal, and sometimes that's to get off of a track that's not working for you. And one of those stories is the one we've got today. Alfredo Bordowski was known as the road rage rabbi in his lifetime, and now the bipolar rabbi. He's faced some real challenges, and I want to welcome him to the Crossroad Diner.
Great to be here, Steve.
Tell me where you are in the world right now.
Well, I am here in New York, but my heart is in Argentina, where I was born, because in 1 hour, Argentina and the Netherlands are going to be playing the quarterfinals for the World Cup. And then, I decided I'm going to have an interesting morning with you and then follow with a lot of anxiety and hopefully with a lot of celebration.
Okay. Well, you have we began talking right before we started recording about your journey. You've had a very interesting journey. Our show is about crossroads and when you come to that place where you feel like you got to make some kind of a change. And you've had some pretty dramatic experiences in that realm. And I'm just going to let you tell us your story and how you took control to the extent that you could of when you found that you were going in a direction you did not want to go, even though some of it was a little bit outside of your control, but the control that you were able to take and why. So the floor is yours, sir.
Then, Steve, I had a turning point which was sudden. It was not gradual. And I have a date and a time for it. It happened June 19th, 2013. I was driving through the town of Mamaroneck in Westchester, New York.
I know it well.
Yeah. And suddenly I had 3 police cars behind me. And they stopped me. I was arrested, put in handcuffs and put into a police car and taken to a precinct. 4 hours later, I was in a court and I was accused of impersonating a police officer. It happens to be that for the last 2 months, I was in a state of manic. I was completely manic, and I was prescribed an antidepressant. Mm-hmm. And the combination of being manic and the antidepressant basically created a volcano. Mm. And a congregant of mine, a retired policeman, gave me a friend and family shield. And I, like Superman or Batman, I assumed the personality of the super policeman on the highways of New York and began basically, when I saw somebody driving too slow or somebody texting, I pulled the shield and I told them how to behave.
Okay.
All that changed on that morning of June 19th, when among the thousands of drivers, Steve, on the street of New York, I decided to show my badge to the girlfriend of the policeman in town. It was maybe a divine intervention for me to stop, actually, looking back.
Well, let me jump in here. Were you aware at that point in time that what you were doing wasn't kosher? You'll forgive my term.
Yeah, I was aware to the point of not crossing the line of touching anybody or stopping cars.
Right.
Okay. Then I retained a moral compass. I drew a line that I did not cross. But at the moment of showing, I had this kind of grandiosity that comes with manic. I have this is kind of bringing justice and bring order to the cosmos.
Right.
And it was an impulse that I couldn't control. And but I didn't cross the line to violence, or then I was almost like in a twilight zone of existence in which I was.
But even though you had this affect that was coming over you, your moral compass kept you inside of lines that were important to you. Am I correct in that?
Important to me, and I retained this sense of what would not be kosher or okay to do to somebody else.
Right.
But believe me, I did things that were very wrong. I tell you, one day I was driving down the Riverside, and was a couple, an elderly couple,
right,
driving on the fast lane at maybe 25 miles an hour. Okay, and I was behind them, and I pulled, to the side, and I showed them the shield, and I asked them, I point them to move to the slow lane.
Right.
And you had to see the terror in the faces. They immediately moved. I tell you, to this day, I am haunted by those faces.
Right.
Then I didn't touch anybody, but I really created a situation of anxiety where people said, "Who is this crazy person?"
Right.
And it took a long time for me to make peace and to forgive myself, and certainly to learn from it. Right. and to become in some way a voice for those who need to take care of themselves before they get to a point where they crash like me.
So how did you do that? You're at the crossroads. You're aware it's a crossroads. You're making a determination that a change is in order. How did you affect that change?
Then I tell you, I think that everybody who goes through a moment of crisis, an awakening moment,
mm-hmm.
Clearly when you're in the midst of it,
yeah.
you're in a survival mode.
Right.
And I just tried to survive. I mean, from day to day, I had 4 cases. I was arrested 4 times because 4 people came out of the woods and they said, that happened to me. And I had to deal with 4 courts and 4 arrests. And I was depressed. Mm. But I think that everybody who goes through a crisis, it comes a moment, a window opens. It's like a spark where you can make the choice to learn from it.
Mm-hmm. That's
okay?
True.
And that's my main message. That people who go through crisis, through a mental illness, they can become teachers to the world. Either you can lament your condition,
right,
or you can draw wisdom from your condition. And maybe train as a rabbi who helped people. And then I went back to school. In the midst of my depression, I said, what can I do? What are my strengths? And at the point I had studied positive psychology,
right,
which is the psychology about the strength. And I look at the results of what is called the VIA inventory, which maps your strengths. And I was in the midst of the depression, Steve, and I looked at my results, was an impulse. And these are my results, my 5 top strengths: creativity, curiosity, love of learning, perseverance, and bravery. And I tell you, I look at my strength and something ignited in me. And I said, wow, what do I do with them? And in the midst of that depression, I don't know where I found energy and stamina, but we all have it if we look for it.
Right.
And I enrolled myself in school to become a social worker.
Well, let's back up for a second. So you're arrested 4 times. You go to court 4 times. What are the consequences that the court is imposing upon you?
Look, the first consequence is that the process took 8 months. And all this process until I was sentenced, it took 8 months.
Okay.
Which I was not allowed to drive. I was attending a partial program at the hospital. I was hospitalized a couple of times because I became suicidal as I was fired from my job.
Were you not properly diagnosed?
Well, a week after, I was not diagnosed, but a week after my first arrest, I was fired from my job. The press had basically a circus with me. Yeah. I was even on the front page of newspapers in Japan and Ireland. People stopped responding to my emails. All kind of things were said about me, that I was a terrorist. You can't imagine the machinery of the press. We joked about, but the headlines were the non-kosher arrest. What I did was wrong, but I didn't touch anybody. There were, more severe crimes going around, but the fact that I was a rabbi fed the machinery of the press. Then I went to a down spiral and became suicidal, and I was hospitalized. And at that point, I was diagnosed bipolar, which I did not know. Okay. Then this was one of the happiest moments in my life, Steve. When the doctors told me at the hospital, you're bipolar, I said, that's fantastic.
Yeah, you have an explanation now. You have reasons.
Now I know. Now I can go to websites. Now I can read books. Right. It's not that I am an anomaly in the world. I belong to a group of people who are sharing the same condition. I can go to groups and express myself and articulate my situation. Then that was a great moment of revelation when they diagnosed me with bipolar. And I know diagnosis could be also had negative effects as people assume that identity and they basically encapsulate themselves with a label. Okay, then you need to be careful. Yeah. Okay, the diagnosis is an aid. It's an aid to you. It's not the end of your life.
Right.
A definition. It's not a definition of who you are. It's a tool.
So you got the diagnosis. You started doing some study. And now you're actually telling this story. Tell me your purpose. Tell me why you've made yourself available to me to tell a story that's got to still be hard for you to carry. But you have a greater purpose in doing this. Share that with me.
I believe that everybody in this life is a cave explorer. We are all explorers.
Okay.
The cave we explore is the cave of the self. It's an existential cave. Everybody can go deep into the self. The journey into the self is deeper and larger than the cosmos. And I believe that people with a mental illness actually are given the gift of exploring deeper caves that others cannot reach. And if you begin looking at yourself as an explorer, and you have curiosity about who you are, and you understand that although you would prefer not to have your condition, but now that you have it, that you can feel down, you can feel depression, you can feel darkness, but also you can feel hope and courage, actually more than the average person. And then you begin redefining who you are, Steve. And from being a victim of your condition, you become a teacher to the world.
Okay.
then my goal is to collect the wisdom of people with mental illness. Now that America, after COVID, and the world knows about depression more than ever before, now that, that 45% of students at colleges across the nation suffer from depression that renders them dysfunctional. Right. Depression is rampant in our country. Who but us, people who have a mental illness, can be the teachers about how to deal with depression? Then I want to fight against stigma, not just by campaigning, not just by knocking the doors of politicians. That's fine, and there are organizations doing that very well. My job, my mission, my quest is to gather a community of people with mental illness, to gather their wisdom, to articulate the wisdom, and to change the paradigm of weakness and victimhood into agents of change and goodness in society. We are wasting our pain.
Amazing. So what I'm sensing here, one of the things that I recommend through the show is the acceptance of personal responsibility for where you are in your life, and realizing that you may not be real happy with where you are, but do the kinds of things that you're talking about. Assess the situation, explore your options, look into yourself and find what it is that you want, and start in pursuit with intention. Now, it's very difficult if you've got a mental illness that has been fogging you and you have not been aware that you are on a track. So, step one is awareness, I would think. How are you going about your mission? How are you going about this business of getting those stories out, other than things like this?
I wrote a blog this morning. I read a weekly blog, and I was telling that I was at a group where I was at the hospital on the partial program, and I was seated next to a young guy who was obese, who was sedated, and was kind of out of it. And actually, I looked down at him more than anything else because of fear. Because I was there and I said to myself, I don't want to be like him.
Right.
And the social worker asked the question, who has helped you in your life? And this guy, something happened. He opened his eyes wide, he sat straight, and he gave the most exquisite, empathic message about how his family had helped him.
That's lovely.
And what I learned at that moment is that no matter how down you are, no matter how chronic your illness it is, there are going to be moments of transcendence.
Yeah.
There are moments in which you can transcend your condition.
Sometimes
clarity. Sometimes there are sparks in the middle of the night.
Right.
Okay, in which like a thunder lets you see the contours of reality for an instant. You need to take advantage of those moments. We need to journal. We need to tell our story. Okay, then I believe that most of us who are struggling have moments of clarity, like you said, that should not be wasted. Then I am now finishing a book, which is going to be called The Wisdom of Mental Illness.
Okay.
Finding strength in your struggles. And what is particular about this book is that on each chapter, and the chapters are very existential. There is a chapter on uncertainty, on shame, on self-esteem,
right,
on wholeness, on diagnosis. Each chapter will have a link, and the reader will click on the link, will be sent to a website, and will have the chance to share wisdom.
So when are you expecting release of the book?
I expect, I would say within 3 to 4 months, and and I will make it very accessible because the goal is to create a community of wisdom.
Sure.
To give it's not a book, it's a project, it's an invitation. I think that the book has some validity as a book, but I want as many people as possible who are silent and isolated to click and share wisdom.
So, you tell folks how they can get to your blog and this incremental building of these notions.
I have a website I invite you to visit. Tell you is bipolarrabbi.com.
Bipolarrabbi.com.
Then you have two R's. You have bipolar, rabbi, and you have two B's for rabbi, and it's one word, bipolarrabbi.com.
Got it.
Then you will see in the website a section where you can leave basic information, and you will get a weekly blog with what I think is some wisdom. And you're going, I am not that kind of person who sends you 10 emails a week. You're going to get a weekly newsletter. And if there is, sometimes I teach seminars, an invitation to a seminar, and you're going to get information about when the book comes out. And sometimes people, when they sign up, also they send me messages. They have questions, spiritual questions, and love to engage with people.
You welcome that question, right?
Absolutely. This is all about dialogue, about sharing wisdom, about empowering each other. That's the goal. So
Andrew Bordowski is an open book. He's bringing us a book. He also has a weekly web message. All of this information will be in the notes for this session so that you can get to it. Some of the website is on screen currently. Andrew, thank you. Alfredo, thank you for being on the show today and sharing your story and having that courage to walk through this horrible experience to share the enlightenment that it produced for you.
Let me say thank you, and let me say, look, wherever you are and whatever you feel, you may be in a room by yourself for a long time. You may feel shame about yourself. You may feel weak. You have wisdom. Just ask yourself the relevant questions. Ask yourself about all this darkness, all this struggle. What has taught me? You can add to society. You can become an agent for good. All of you have wisdom, a wisdom so necessary for society today.
Thank you so very much. Wise words for all of us who find ourselves at that crossroad where we've got to make a change and we have to do some examining of ourselves. Thank you, sir, for being on today.
Pleasure.
We'll see you next time on the Crossroad Diner. Check out Alfredo's blog at bipolarrabbi.com. That's bipolarrabbi.com, all one word, no spaces. And be with us next time on the Crossroad Diner, that place where your spirit goes when you might need desperately to change direction.